So, Jessie, when you were hired into a startup as a first hire, what was the company trying to accomplish?
To be very honest, I don't know. I feel this is a very opportunistic hire. Within the company, there are a lot of people who care about data. And I think there's some very vague sense that we need some data person to understand the space and providing value using data. But there was no vision, there's no roadmap. So data foundation is largely missing. If I were the hiring manager, very honestly, I would probably want to hire first.
Our guest today is Jessie Li, former head of data at Descript, an AI-powered editing software startup that's reimagining video and audio editing workflows. She previously led a team of product data scientists at Meta and also spent time at companies like Flipboard and Google. In this episode, we cover who her startups for in the data space, what shocked her most on day one as the first data hire, why bringing in best practices doesn't always work, and how Jessie built a data function from nothing to a full stack team. Jessie also shares a candid take on burnout, ambiguity, and why being too humble in a startup can actually backfire. If you ever consider working in or are curious what life is like at a startup, you'll want to watch this episode. If you enjoy this content, subscribe to Data Neighbor in your favorite podcast app and YouTube. Let's dive into our conversation with Jessie Li. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Data Neighbor podcast with Shravya, Hai, and Sean. Today we're talking to Jessie formerly from Descript and also previously at Meta. Welcome, Jessie.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm very humbled and excited to be chatting with you today.
Hey, Jessie, really excited. I think you've got some of the FANG logos as well. You've worked at multiple places and you also now have the experience of a startup. So pretty excited to go through all your varied, experiences here.
Yeah, a very interesting experience going between the big tech companies and startups and back and forth.
Yeah, so we're going to focus a lot of this podcast on that journey, being the first hire at a startup, transitioning from big tech, and what is it like if people are considering joining a startup for data professionals and stuff like that. So to start off, could you kind of tell the audience about your experience doing that transition? What made you decide to leave Meta, I believe, a few years ago, and then join a quote unquote kind of like a much lesser known company as a first data hire?
That's a very spicy first question. So your question is, what was the reason that I left my previous company to join the startup, and what did my transition look like?
Yeah, let's start there.
Are there specific angles you were talking about transition? Like what do you mean by transition?
Oh, just like the motivation behind that. What drove your interest in making that move? Because a lot of people are like, hey, let me grow as much as possible in as FANG as possible of a company.
I see.
Not just that too high. Like, Jessie, I'll tell you, right? When I was at Microsoft, I was trying to come out, and the first thing was like, it's scary to be in a place. For someone who's been in big tech, they might think that it's maybe not as stable, or does it mean that I lose my brand value? There are so many questions that come along the way. Maybe they didn't come to you, but would love to know your thinking and your motivation into what was going through in your head at that point of time.
Yeah, totally. I think for me, it was a push and a pull model. There's a pull side of it, which is like, in other words, like I'm running towards, and there is a push side of it, which is like what I'm trying to run away from. I think on the pull side, there are two major reasons. One reason is that in the long run, I want to be ahead of data. And in order to be ahead of data, I think it's very important to understand the entire life cycle for data. So not narrowly focused on one aspect of data, but holistically understand where data come from, where we store them, how do we transport it, how do we make use of them downstream. So in a bigger company, it's inevitable that every role has a more fleshed out rubrics on how you are going to be evaluated. And you kind of more narrowly focused on one part of it, which in my case is data analytics. It's not saying I'm like forbidden to do other things or look at other things and understand the other things. It's just like there's no incentive for me to do that, basically. I think there's the other reason on the pull side, which is my husband himself is a startup founder, and he has been doing startup for many years, like over 5, 6. Right now, it's maybe almost 10 years, like for a very long time, right? And back then, he's doing startup. I had startup experience before in Flipboard, and I really enjoyed my startup experience. And so I feel like there's a lot of fun in the startup that I miss. And at the same time, back then, I had a 1-year-old baby. And to me, I was thinking, my baby's only 1 year old. I don't have any financial commitment yet. Even if I'm going to send her to a private school later on, that would be when she's like 4 years old. And then that would be like many years away. So I get this like golden period of time where I can just do whatever I want in trial and error. So want to see the holistic picture in the entire data life cycle. And I want to go back to startup to enjoy all the startup fun while there's like a little like financial pressure or other kind of like family pressure would be the pull side of the reasons. I think there's also a push side of it. One thing that I realized when I was working at Meta is I started on more mature products and slowly got into more and more 0 to 1 product. As I mentioned, I worked on neighborhoods and like a bunch of other 0 to 1 products. And I really enjoyed that. And one of the I think the benefits for startup is like they move fast. So that's the biggest advantage for any startup. But in a bigger company, it's tricky. In order to build our 0 to 1 product, there was a lot of scrutiny. There's a lot of process, I would say. When we touch the other surfaces, we need to go through the different XFM meetings, getting sign-offs. And at some point, I was like, almost like half of the team, like the PM, the eng, the data are spending time writing those documentation to get sign-offs from the other teams. And that is not the part I would say I enjoy working the most. I think there is another part of it, which is there is this tension on working on 0 to 1 product and take time to polish that product versus delivering outcomes. Within Meta, I think it's known for its 6 months performance cycle where every 6 months we have this pressure to deliver something. For a 0 to 1 product, immediately there's expectation that you are going to drive some incremental value for the business, which is to some extent very unrealistic. Like if you think of Figma, it took them 6 years to really polish in stealth mode, build things out, and then like hit the market with a really, really good product with product market fit. Whereas I think there's this tension when we're working on the 0 to 1 product. On one hand, we were still trying to find the product market fit. At the same time, we will ask the question, how many are what is the user base for your product? What is the incremental value for the business? This is like a tension. I think back then, I don't feel like I am well positioned to solve. And I want to work in an environment, like a startup environment that allow me to build the 0 to 1 product without that much scrutiny and without this tension where I need to deliver numbers, whereas the numbers might not be the right thing to focus on yet.
Wow. I mean, first, I loved how you divided them at the start, the push and pull. Totally agree. Probably from now on, when we talk about problems, we talk about the push and the pull side of it. And absolutely agree with what you're trying to say. I think I have some experience myself as well. I've worked in big tech like Microsoft, and I've worked at Nextdoor, not as startup-y as probably your experience, but it is to some extent. And I totally agree with this organizational differences that come with being part of a big org and how many things you'll do as part of being of this big org. You probably get a small piece of the pie of a big pie versus you get a big piece of a small pie. Like, what do you choose between this versus that, right?
Yeah.
And Jessie, what I loved about what you said is you've actually started in FANG at a pretty high level. You were at a pretty high level and you now moved into a startup at a high level, right? But what you said would also, to be honest, affect anyone. It could be someone who started out as well to some extent, right? If you join a small team as a junior data scientist or an intern or something like that, what would you get to see as an intern in a big tech versus what would you get to see as an intern at a small? It's the same difference that you mentioned, right? The passion, the type of energy that you see, and the type of like work environment and culture and the financial freedom, probably like all of that ties up to even a younger data scientist. What
Yeah.
do you think? Do you think it would be the same or anything else that a junior person or probably even like a mid-career person or not like a leader, they're looking for and they have these options in front of them? What do you think they should be looking into?
Yeah, I do feel like everyone has their different things they are looking for, and every company is different. It's very hard to say black and white. Big companies are like that, small companies are like some like that. And like one advice I usually give people who are looking for trying to decide going to big or small companies, before they even talk to the companies, list out a few dimensions. What are the most important things for them? Like basically trying to figure out what they are looking for. If they have like 4 things that they are looking for, then it's very easy to talk to bigger companies or small companies and talk to the interviewers, recruiters, trying to collect signal in the entire interview process on, is this something that I'm looking for that this company will provide? Is it something that this company will provide? It might differ significantly, like between all the different companies and person by person. And one of the tricky thing that I found is when I talk to potential candidates, what they are looking for in their next role. Many people haven't thought about it before. It's like if they are looking for jobs, they don't know what they're looking for. It's hard for me to tell them if I can give them what they need. It's just really, really hard. Yeah, so list out the dimensions that are the most important for them and then collect signals. Don't wait until they get the offer and then talk to their hiring manager when they start asking those questions. Like when they have an idea of what they're looking for, they can start collecting those information signals like from the very first interview that they have. And maybe at the end of the day, when they have like multiple offers, they can just like score each company against all the dimensions, and you can do weighted or just simple average. And it makes deciding on an offer much, much easier, as opposed to some of the people I talk to, they're like, I really like this company, but this company doesn't have that thing the other company provided me. And my question is like, well, is that thing the most important thing for you? And they're like, maybe not. It just makes it unnecessarily hard and complicated.
Yeah, I think the interesting aspect, I think especially in this job environment where most people are probably like, hey, I just need a job, that becomes less of a thing that they prioritize in terms of thinking intentionally about, hey, what I want to accomplish with my next
That's a
role.
good point.
I can't be unemployed for so long because I'm afraid that it's going to be harder and harder for me to get a job without a job for an extended period of time. What kind of advice would you have for people in that situation?
People in the situation where they're just like looking for a job
Yeah, they're just
for
like, hey,
now.
I just need a job at this point. Like, how do
Actually,
you?
I mean, to that point, whatever Jesse said to actually might even benefit them. I'll tell you why. This is just my understanding. Jesse, correct me if I'm wrong, and hi, you too. Is knowing what you enjoy as a person, knowing what you would want to work on, is actually going to help you lead to the job as well. Imagine if you're very passionate, or if you know this is what you want to work. If you know, probably you want to work in big tech, Jesse, like your point, because you want to understand how big orgs work. How does a structured organization look like? What does processes mean? Maybe that's what you want to work and understand because you're starting out. Then you probably know what to talk to a recruiter when you get the first call, and probably that specificity and that intention of yours get through to the call to the recruiter, to the messages for referrals, and to also like hiring managers when they interview you and stuff. So probably knowing what you want and what you enjoy and the intention as well, even in the tough market, might not probably be useful when you get multiple offers and choose one, but it at least help you land the referral, land the first recruiter call or things like that. Yeah, I mean, do you agree, Jesse?
I have a few thoughts. I think the original question is for people who are just like trying to look for a job, like what are the advice, right? And I think for these group of people, there are like 2 sub camps I can think of. One camp is they don't care what they're doing now. They don't care about what is the next job after this job. And these people, I think they should just apply as many as possible and just optimize like short term. I think what you are really getting to is there's a group of people that in the longer term, they might have some North Star and that they want to go towards. In the current environment, it's really hard to land on a dream job. And like for them, like what is advice for them? I think for these people, one of the really good advice I got when I was in my graduate school is you need to think 2 jobs ahead, right? Like for your next job, what would be something you want to do? And so you use that as a lens to filter on your next job. Yes, in my next job, maybe there are only 20% of the things that I really enjoy doing, and all the other 80% things I don't care that much. And that makes it extra, because this is not a job that is your dream job, that you enjoy every bit of them. And so it's even more important to have a lens, knowing what are some of the skill sets that is critical for me that I want to learn, that I want to apply for my next job, and maybe pay extra attention to do those things like in your immediate next job and maximize. I think there's something that I heard, or the one way to view your job is like you are not working for your employer is like working for you. There are specific skill sets you want to improve on. And this is a company that provides you with the opportunity to practice your muscle that you want to practice, and they even pay you money and make good use of it. So yes, not everyone can land on a dream job, but having a perspective and opinion on what are the most important things that matter to you in the longer term can help you allocate your time, energy, resources more wisely in your current job or next job that is not your dream job.
So Jessie, how do you think about that from startup standpoint? Do you think like if someone's looking out and they get an opportunity at a startup, how do you think they could leverage that? Like, that type of experience when you're starting out or when you're midway, when compared to you striving like a couple of years and, especially when you're starting out, and if you want to do applied science and stuff, there could be like lots of lead code, like all of this prep that today's like graduates has to go through to get into a big tech. So I'd love how you mentioned optimizing what to do in your current job to land the next dream job that you said. So how do you think they should look at it?
Yeah, I think the key to that, my opinion, is like the key to that is very intentional learning. What I mean by that is that I feel joining a startup, it's definitely a double-edged sword. What I mean by that is, on one hand, you as for example, the only and first person for a specific function, you are pretty much the ceiling for this function. You have a blank slate that you can do whatever you want. And if there is this thing that you really want to work on, nobody's going to be in your way and tell you can do this, you can do that. You get the full autonomy to define the space, figure out a solution, and push as far as you want. I think the downside of that is that you are the ceiling for this function, and you might not have other people that you can brain buddy with and like bounce ideas off of each other, and you might need to look for resources outside. And in situations like this, I think intentional learning is really, really important. I can give you an example. Before that, I think there's this like word of wisdom by my previous manager, which is that it's very easy to become complacent in startup as well as in big companies. Mm-hmm. And I think what he meant by that is that in startup, it's very easy for someone to say, hey, I'm the subject matter expert. Everyone comes to me, I know everything. The reality is they haven't seen the bigger world yet. They were a big fish in a small pond, and they don't know what actually good, what is the best practices look like. And the other side is true as well in bigger companies, which is that they have all the best platforms already built up for them. They don't need to care about a lot of things. They are all taken care of. So people can easily mistake what is the capability for this platform from this platform with what is their own capability. And it's very easy to be complacent and say, oh, that's easy. This is like straightforward. And reality is, if you don't have this platform, it's not that easy. And in startup world, for example, I build the experimentation culture and experimentation process from scratch. And it involved a lot of like reading the different documentations for the different like experimentation providers in the market, and then reading into the statistics behind them and laying out the dimensions for all the potential features or capabilities in each of in this tool, and trying to compare that with all the documentations to see if this tool has that, if that tool has that. And I learned so much from that, as opposed to I came from bigger company. I came from Meta, which has really, really good experimentation platform. And a lot of the things I don't even know when I was at Meta, because I have this very fancy tool. I know how to click things. I know to hover over these things and look at the numbers. I stopped there. Like the intentional learning piece, nobody asked me to read all those documentations, but I think all those things pay off later on when I was building up this experimentation culture, educating the rest of the companies, like why we want to do this, how this is done, what are the gotchas like in this tool, like I benefit from all those intentional learning later on when I talked with the other companies. And there is, I think, the level of depth that is probably hard for me to get to when I'm in a bigger company. So I feel like there are just like so many things to learn, and you are the person responsible for your own learning and the function and the solutions.
Yeah, I mean, can't agree with you more on that. I mean, how many years did it take to build the experimentation platform at Nextdoor, Shravya? Like a couple years, something like that? Yeah, I mean, like in any other companies that I worked at, to your point, it's like it's all presented to you clean on a platter. It's like, hey, we can just use it. And but not true of many companies. They just don't have the resources for it. I want to dig into the challenges that you faced as a first data hire at Descript. What was it that when you joined day one, you were like, what is happening?
The most prominent shock is the data culture piece. I think I was being probably overly optimistic. I came from a big tech company, which is famous for its data culture. I know what best practices look like. And so when I joined this startup, I'll just bring all the best practices here. And we're done. And yeah, all good. The reality is, I think when I don't understand the status quo of this current startup, and I don't understand where the pain point is, and just like a blanket bring in a solution, say, hey, this is how we want to build our data culture. I don't meet the company where it is at. That means a lot of resistance or like a lack of understanding. There are a lot of education that need to be done. So I think the biggest reverse culture shock or culture shock is like, the data culture is not there, and I can just like bring in the big tech companies' data culture and call it a day. Yeah.
And so you had to probably from scratch, you have to convince people of the value of data, why it's useful, how you should actually be thinking about it, that kind of stuff. So were you doing like a lot of road shows?
I think it was doing the education on a lot of different fronts, I would say. I think of the data team like in 3 buckets. I think I probably shared with you before. Like there are like the 3 buckets of data foundation, data insights, and data team and data culture. So data foundation is about what is our tooling to, for example, data ingestion, data transformation, data warehouse, BI experimentation. There's a data insights part, which can further break down into 2 parts. The strategic part, where we proactively identify opportunities to influence the company strategy, roadmap, etc. There's a more operational side of it, which is to help with experimentation, follow-up ad hoc analysis, measurements, back, all these kind of things. And then there's a data team, data culture. Data team is around like a higher coaching people, and data culture is potentially the more narrowly defined road shows, like a brown bags on why experimentation 101, why experimentation in the first place. And I think at the different stage in my past 3 years, I might put different emphasis on the different buckets that I just heard. I think when I joined, data foundation was a big piece because it's garbage in, garbage out. If I don't have reliable data, I can't really draw insights from that. But very soon, like maybe 3 months in, I realized that, hey, we really have a big gap in our data foundation, and I want to bring in some expert, like can help us build up the data foundation. So I started hiring for my founding analytics engineer. And then so over time, for me, the focus for me shifted from data foundation to data insights, and then data team and data culture. So I think it changed over time.
Got it. That's cool. That's awesome. I think every company kind of goes through that. Did you have a roadmap when you go in, or is it like a, hey, here's the need of the time immediately, so I'm gonna kind of put out this fire, versus like is that how it looks in terms of your day to day?
There was no roadmap when I joined. There was no roadmap. There was no vision. So I think the first thing I did is get a lay of the land, understand how does our data flow? What does our data tooling look like? And talk to the different stakeholders, understand for different functions, like where we have the most needs and demand. For those demand, what is the ultimate impact of those potential data work, so I can prioritize accordingly. It's like playing a game where the entire map was closed to begin with, and I'm doing a little bit of excursion or exploration over time to open up the map for the data world within my startup.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I can totally see that's also something that draws people into, right? Like that it's unpredictable. Like every day it's going to be different. Like there's no known processes or things that you have to follow, that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, I mean, that's a very different side of it too, though.
Yeah, I think that's something some people are looking for, but might not be the case for everyone. Like in my interviews, like with potential candidates, some people were looking for more coaching and mentorship. Some people are looking for structures and processes. And in those cases, they might not be the best fit.
Yeah, I remember trying to hire for someone in my previous company, and they were already in L6, like a really high level. And they wanted to come in and want to have someone above them or equal to them to learn from. And I'm like, I'm not sure if you'll get them in a startup, right? That is maybe even probably 1,000 or more, 2,000, 3,000 or more. You'd get someone who is above you, a good chunk of them that you could learn from. A startup, you probably are expected to be the leader and the inspiration for others to follow rather than the other way around.
Yeah.
So this is where it goes back to, Jessie, what you were talking about, that write down what you are looking for and see if what company or what level of the company, from big tech, small tech to a startup, what addresses those and things like that.
Yeah.
So one question, Jessie, in that regard, when probably you tried to hire when you were at a startup and you maybe have seen hiring when you were at a big tech, how do you see the difference between the type of persona that would be great for a startup versus great for a big tech?
I can probably speak more to the startup world. Like at Meta, I think we had this luxury where there's like such a big supply that we have a lot of people in the boot camp. And for the hiring managers, we pretty much talk to people in the boot campers who are already past the bar. They are all really good people. And then I basically see which ones I have there's the biggest mutual fit. And it's, I think, significantly different in the startup world. It's much, much harder to hire people. I personally was involved in the entire hiring process, from writing the job description, writing the interview loops, doing the initial screening. Originally, I was also doing some technical screening and also the on-site. So there was this
That's a lot, Jessie. I'm not recovering from that.
Yeah,
I'm imagining a schedule for the candidate of hire manager screen with Jessie Li, technical round back to back with Jessie Li. It's like analytical reasoning with Jessie Li. That's the whole day.
Yeah, I think at Meta there was this policy. I don't know if that's the case with next door, that there is 2 interviews a week or something. But at my previous startup, I think there was a period of time where I had 12 or 14 interviews every week, and it was very, very intense. I was pretty brain dead after for that week.
Just come in, just join. I'm fine.
Auto, yes.
Yeah, so it was It was hard. And I think getting back to your question, which is like, what are the different like personas? For clarification, were you asking what are the kind of personas we are looking for, or what are the personas I saw like when I was interviewing for?
That'll be great. I'd love to learn both. But to be honest, my question is majorly for people, let's say, who are listening to this podcast and who wants to understand, am I good for a startup or not? Like, So that would address this, and it would also help us to understand what type of personas you kind of you've kind of seen in that process, and who excelled or where was the fit. That'd be great too.
I see. I think for the startup roles, like there's apparently a set of like technical requirements that I'm not getting into because every role is different. I do think there is probably a set of values that are shared more broadly for the startup compared to the bigger companies. I think number one thing is what we chatted before. The person needs to be a self-starter. They need to be autonomous. We're not looking for someone who is waiting to get asked for doing certain things. Like they should be proactive and try to identify problems, the things that they can work on, etc. And I think related to that, people who are resourceful, unlike bigger companies, you probably have the set or allocated resources for XYZ. And in startup world, we don't necessarily always have the resources, and you need to be very creative in unblocking yourself, getting things done and in a creative way when resource is like limited. There is, I think, the third thing, which is being okay with ambiguity. Some people, when they like from bigger tech companies, they're looking for established processes, structures, rubrics. And in startup world, many of them are still to be developed. And to some extent, some of them are not necessary at the current stage. And so one needs to be okay with all these ambiguity and live with those ambiguity. What else? Growth mindset, especially for startups that are like moving really, really fast and growing really, really fast. I think in bigger, more stable companies or teams, the challenges or the questions might not change drastically. The way people or teams operate might not change drastically. The vision, the roadmap might not change as drastically. You might do an annual road mapping and then you check in or every quarter or something. But in startups, all the things move really, really fast, rightfully so, because startups are agile and then they can move really, really fast and they address and adapt to the changes on the market internally, etc. So being adaptive and have a growth mindset that they grow with a company or grow slightly faster than a company is really, really, really desirable, as opposed to people who are more, I don't know, like more laid back and expect this. I have the set of expectations. They're not going to change for the next 6 months. And this is the only thing I need to do. And I just need to do well. And I'm good.
Yeah, totally agree. In fact, I remember saying this too. There's only one constant thing, and that's change.
Yeah.
And people should be ready for that when they come in. And that shows, I think, when we try to hire people, right, Jesse? And probably that's the reason why when there are so many people that are like, I have a great technical background. I fit so well. I don't know why I didn't get through. It's because of this culture fit that comes off. The questions you ask, how you show up, the type of projects you explain, and probably answer to the question what you're looking for, the type of answer they give. A combination of that tells us that are they a fit for this constantly evolving, changing thing, or do they are better fit for a place that's long-term and stable? Maybe they expect the same level of high expectations and hard work, but you know what you're going after. Versus at startup, you don't know. You just need to run with some vision, some knowing that it might change in tomorrow.
Yeah, totally. I guess like there's one more thing that came to my mind is that some people, they have work-life balance as their top priority. I don't mind, as a hiring manager, I don't mind people asking about work-life balance questions because it's a very important thing to understand about the company.
Yeah.
But when this is the top priority for people, I think this might be a bit too generalized, but I feel startup might not be the right fit when work-life balance is a top priority.
I'm smiling because I've heard this like so many times. I think even hi. This is like the most, I don't don't want to say controversial, but some sort of like when someone asks you the question, you're like, okay, not fit right away.
I do feel that's a very honest advice there, right? If people are like, "Hey, I'm gonna go to a startup," the reality is there's some trade-offs, and that's to your point, Jesse. That's a big one. That's
Yeah,
likely a big one.
I do not auto saying no to anyone who asks work-life balance questions. I try to probe a bit more, and I don't mind people asking about it. But if that's their top priority, I would ask them to think again if startup is the right place for them.
Got it. I worked at a few startups in my life, and the 9 to 9 is real. Cool. So let's see. So for startups that evolve so quickly, things change day by day, week by week, and basically you have to go with the flow. How do you then think about short-term versus long-term needs? So back to your original framework, for example, about data foundation is the very first piece that we have to get right. That's going to take a little bit more time than, for example, some other stuff that you can shift pretty rapidly. But in your mind, that needs to be done. That's the right thing to do. How do you kind of balance that trade-offs?
I think on the macro level, it comes down to planning. Within my company, we have a quarterly planning cadence, where on the functional level, on the data level, what we are trying to balance between is we try to spend 50% of the time working on the big rock projects or signature projects. These are some of the more foundational things that we work on that would benefit not only the data team, but also the rest of the company in the longer run. And usually they don't come out of nowhere or like by the data team only. Usually it's like throughout the quarter, we talk to the different stakeholders, and many people might ask questions from different angles. But if you dig deep enough, you realize fundamentally it's the same problem. If we solve that, all these questions can be very easily answered. And then so we spend the 50% of the time on the big rock projects that we committed to. And then we try to spend 30% of the time doing operational stuff, all those burning last minute operational asks from across the different functions. And then we spend maybe 10% of our time, 10-20% of time working on the either side project or trying to do a data university to culture or doing brown bags, etc. So I think on the very macro level, we are trying to leverage this planning cadence to balance between all the longer term important projects versus the short term urgent projects. I think there's a micro level on the day to day. It comes down to prioritization. People all come to us and their projects are apparently always very urgent and very important, can help us solve this question. I think there are two general approaches to that. One is trying to understand, get to the bottom of what they are trying to do. If they were provided this data, what decisions or what changes they're going to make differently. What is called decision-driven measurement, the decision-driven data analysis. And sometimes people haven't thought it through. And when you ask them, what are you trying to do with the data? And they're like, it's really good to know. And you know that it's not that.
Curious. I'm so curious.
Yeah, I'm so curious.
It's good to know.
Yeah, I'm curious too, but unfortunately, it will be a lower priority. And I think we can probably push back 40% of the projects that the stakeholders haven't really thought it through. And then for the remaining, when they ask a question, usually they are big and vague, but then you can always scope down to a much smaller version of it, which immediately addresses their questions or problems. And then we can deliver that scope down version first. And then oftentimes later on, people are I think I'm good. You don't really need to get to the other part. I was just curious. And then, so I think on a day-to-day basis, on operational level, it's around a lot of communication, clear communication and aggressive prioritization.
Got it. Yeah, no, that makes sense. That's honestly very, very transferable to companies of all sizes as well. So it's glad that even in startups, the quote unquote the best practices still works. It's not some foreign land where you need to bring in a completely different approach.
Yeah.
Cool. So I'm curious, Jessie, when you were hired into a startup as a first hire, what was the company trying to accomplish? Like, were they like, hey, all of a sudden we need data now, so let's get a
That's a
savior? Or was it something else?
That's a great question. To be very honest, I don't know. I feel this is a very opportunistic hire. There, like within the company, there are a lot of people who care about the data, and I think there's some very vague sense that we need some data person to understand the space and then can be proactive providing value using data. But as I said, there was no vision, there's no roadmap. So when I brought in, I was like, data foundation is largely missing that I want to build on. And if I were the hiring manager, very honestly, I would probably want to hire a data engineer or analytics engineer first to build out the data foundation.
Got it. Interesting. Okay. What were your first 30-day like when you were hired? Like, I'm really curious. Like, what did your hiring manager give you as hey, here's the expectation?
No, data foundation, data insights, data team and culture is my framework. So there wasn't really clear expectation. I remember when I joined, there was like, oh, make sure you familiarize yourself with the tool, because I think video audio editing software is indeed much, much harder than all the other products I worked on. I think like I always feel very proud of myself having really good product sense. And when I joined this company, I realized, oh, I was being complacent. And because I worked on either social networks, which is two-sided market, someone opened the composer post, someone read it, like it, share it, comment it, or it's a marketplace. Someone wants to sell something and someone decide to buy it. All those workflows are very clearly defined, and it's like short, like the workflow, end-to-end workflow is like a really short, clearly defined, clear milestones. Video editing is like a very, very different. Like it can take people 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months to create a video. And then unlike those short set of actions need to take to complete this, like to complete writing a post on Instagram, video editing involves a lot of actions, hundreds or maybe thousands of actions. So it's very, very different. So I think I was given a lot of time to familiarize with the product. In the first 2 weeks, we had this thing called Creator Bootcamp, where we were asked to use a few different tools in the market and then create our intro video within the company. And then
That's cool.
I think immediately there was some like analysis I was asked to perform, but like that was, as far as I remember, what I was provided with when I joined. And then it was more on me to figure out, like unlock the map for data, and then start to have like opinion on what are the areas I need to explore more, invest more, what are the areas they can't wait, and then develop the vision, mission, the roadmap. I also have a giant table, which is my assessment for our data, for the data situation at my company in terms of data foundation, like monitoring, data insights, full retrospective, understanding piece, forward-looking, predictive, or proactively identify opportunity piece. I have a giant table where I list like what are the expectations for individual dimensions. And then there's another column, which is like, what is the status quo? What is the delta? What we're going to work on in the next quarter, the 2 quarters later on, etc.
So the first hire basically is, I guess the expectation is you tell them what to do.
Yes, like you are giving a playground and figure it out.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That kind of makes sense. I remember when I was hired into Pinterest, it was like a team of 2 or something at the time. Definitely the first in my growth. I used to work in growth. I remember my, now that you talked about it, my onboarding doc was a 1-page, oh no, it was half a page, talk to these people and figure out what they need and then
Yes.
and then go from there. Like literally that was the
Yeah, I think
onboarding
I
doc.
had a very similar experience.
Got it. Okay. Interesting. Did you have to wear multiple hats at a startup, or were you given the quote unquote luxury of focus on just getting the data piece right.
I mean, data itself has a lot of hats, right?
Yeah, I think data itself has a lot of hats. So it's not explicit that you are only going to work on the data stuff or you have to work on multiple hats, but you need to step up. And when there's a gap that you feel you are empowered and you have the technical ability to address. Like for me, I came from product data science analytics background. So analytics engineering, data engineering, all those like DBT data transformation stuff was something that I didn't know before. So that was after I joined the startup, I realized, oh, this is actually the most important thing and biggest gap within the company. I remember taking like a Udemy courses on like intro to data engineering, analytics engineering. DBT also has some free courses and to pick up on those knowledge. I think this gets back to what we talked about, which is like in bigger companies, I'm so spoiled. I don't need to worry about all these things. I don't really know what is star schema, what is a snowflake schema, what is a slowly changing dimension, SCD 1, 2, 3. Like all these, I don't need to worry about like the storage. And we usually have like a very, very wide tables, like a giant table that I can use to do all my analysis. But in startup world, all these things, I need to think about it.
What was the toughest part, Jessie, in the entire thing, if you look at it?
I think the toughest thing is to, as the ceiling for my function, the first person and ceiling in my function, have the proper calibration on what is something I know, what is something I know I don't know, what is something that from my previous company is a best practices that I should be opinionated to bring into the startup versus what are the things that are my past life knowledge that no longer applies, that I should put aside. I think this calibration piece is really tricky because internally, there's no one more senior than me when it comes to data. I don't have proper calibration, like looking up to the leadership. But when I reach out externally, it's hard to calibrate. Like I try to reach out to a lot of head of data from the different companies, but every company has a different context and situation challenges. And so whatever they say might not apply. So I think that was, the hardest part for me, knowing what are the things that I should be really opinionated and push forward versus what are the things that are the things that I should set aside.
Basically the unknown, right? Because there's nothing ahead, no one in front of you.
Either things unknown or things I know but no longer apply here. I think that was, I guess, like this is like another challenge that I didn't expand on, which is, I think that's also a hard lesson in learning, which is when I joined the startup, I think I was overly humble. I reset myself and told myself, this is a startup. A lot of things from my previous company might not apply here. So I'm just going to be really, really humble and absorb all the things in this company and internalize them and reconcile with what I know before. And I think I overdid it. And what I mean by that is, I think at some point I got very disoriented because there are things that I thought were the best practices, but people here, they might not see the value, or they tried it doesn't work, or they had a misunderstanding. I don't know the exact reason, but for different things, I might have resistance. And I was like, maybe that's because what I know before does not apply here anymore. And in hindsight, I think I overdid it, and it could be disorienting. Yeah.
I love how candid you are. Like this totally is going to help someone who are trying to understand what a startup is like. If they choose to get into it, what type of problems will they face, or what type of attitude do they have to go and work there with, and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So that's such a helpful reflection there. In the context, in the spirit of reflections, now that you've completed 3+ years at the startup, reflecting back, kind of like what like versus where you started, What's kind of like what's the end of it? What's the delta that you can describe to our audience?
That's an interesting question. What is the delta of me? I think getting back to what I was looking for first, the pull and push model, right? I think on the pull side, I had a much better understanding of the entire data lifecycle, from data ingestion to data transformation, BI, data warehouse, experimentation, all the tools that when I joined, we barely had any of the tools. And now we have, I think, a pretty lean, but like a very effective data stack. We use Fivetran, dbt, BigQuery, and then Hacks, Notebook, all these data tools. I was usually part of the evaluation process, and I don't work closely on every single one of them. We have a really great analyst engineer, and now two of them. But like I observe them like very closely, and I learn a lot from them. So that is like something that I would never have the opportunity, or very hard to have the opportunity to have in bigger companies. The second piece of the pool is like just have fun in a startup world, and also get into the push side, right? We can move fast and we don't have as much scrutiny, and I basically get to define my own function. So there is a lot of, I think, exercise there, being the true owner for a function, being responsible for its success and its roadmap. Yeah, I think these are the major deltas. I think I achieved all the things I was looking for when I joined. I feel I probably understand my husband a bit better. As a startup founder, yeah, I got to observe how our leadership work, and I learned a lot from them. And all those learnings, I would come back home and say, hey, this is what our CEO is doing. I think that's really amazing. I think you should do. There are just like so many things I got to observe very close that would be a luxury in bigger companies, like how often you are able to observe how your CEO operates and how they think, how they make decisions. I think all those things I really cherish those experiences. That is, I think, I wouldn't say once in a lifetime, but like a very rare opportunities.
Yeah. Wow. What an amazing way to come to an end to this episode. Shravya, do you have any other questions that you're interested in finding out?
Yeah, I mean, Jesse, what do you think is the most underrated skill for data? Data science. If now that you have other roles as well, you could talk about them too, but data science.
I feel like whatever I say would be very cliched. So it will not be underrated, but like one emergent thing, I don't have an answer for it, but like I would just like throw it out there, is the ability to use AI. I do feel that AI is going to play a really, really huge part in our day-to-day. From my personal experience, we were using AI. I think we were not having workflows that are AI native, but rather leverage AI to enhance our existing workflows. For example, we were writing code, we use AI to help us like debug or explain codes from other people, etc. But I feel AI really has the power to significantly improve the productivity for the data professionals, and we were just getting started, I think. So that makes me really excited. I think your previous episode is about AI, and I really want to listen to it. And I think vibe coding is something like that's really, really new that I heard recently. And I also read an article most recently from the CEO of Anthropic. It's called Machines
Of Loving Grace?
Machines of Loving Grace. It's a really, really great read. And then I want to use like my next week or two to spend more time thinking about how to leverage data, leverage AI.
So, Jesse, do you know what? This was the only podcast that went until so long without AI being mentioned. And I'm so glad you mentioned it as like the finale, because we generally, I mean, data
Yeah.
deeper without AI, that can't happen. So thank you. Makes total sense.
Yeah.
Yes, leveraging AI in daily workflows of people are not talking about it as much as they should in bigger companies. So, and people
Yeah.
know how to do it well is going to be pretty good. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
And it's going to be like super important for people who want to work in startups too nowadays, because that's going to make them 10x faster, 10x better, hopefully, if they know how to use it, versus before when the tools are not available. So love that you brought up that point. We generally we, especially lately, because we truly believe AI is non-negotiable for data professionals. So we went very hard on just AI topics in general. But I love that this episode, we really get to focus on the reality of startup life, what the first data hire looks like, and all that kind of stuff. And the fact that you brought up AI helps us rank now on
I
the
know.
algorithm.
This is the first time we did a deeper dive on startups. And to be honest, I've been in the startup world, but not as startup-y as what your experience was, Jesse. And it was pretty great. Thank you so much for coming and, sharing your experience. There were some really honest conversations that we don't get people talk about. So really appreciate you sharing all those things with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you again. And to our viewers and listeners, if you like this episode, please like and subscribe. If you have questions for Jessie, please leave them in a comment below and we will get to every single one of them. Stay tuned for another episode like this in the future. We will see you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.